Hi, I'm Breyers with Breyers Canine Academy, and on this video we're going to talk about how to get your dog to listen when it's around distractions.
So I have an 18-month-old Australian Shepherd.
Okay.
She is very hyper, gets really distracted in busy environments and by just small little things. How do I get her to focus?
So let's first start with why, because there's a lot of reasons why your dog can't focus, and we got to figure out that before we can go into the how. So the first thing is you got to make sure you're utilizing something that's motivating enough to focus. We like to use food, and the reason we try to use food is because dogs associate food to survival. So you already have something instilled that says, this is a reason I should focus. Yeah. There are a couple of reasons. One, the first question I would ask you is, do you overfeed your dog? The second question I would ask is your dog free feeding? Do you free feed your dog? Which means, do you just leave food out where your dog can access it all the time? The third thing I would ask you is, are you trying to get your dog to focus in an environment that's too challenging? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I would answer those questions before we can start on how to get your dog to focus.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say you checked off all those boxes. You don't free feed your dog. Your dog's not overweight, right? But for some reason, it's still not focusing, okay? Then the last reason why your dog can't focus is you haven't set the right narrative. You haven't set the right narrative when it comes to feeding or training your dog when you have food. And so the right narrative that you want to set is, when I have food, when you lose focus, you will lose your reward. Once the dog understands that narrative and they understand the consequences behind that narrative, that's when we can start training your dog to focus.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I get why, but how do we start doing this?
Okay, all right. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start in an environment where it's not too challenging. Mm-hmm. We want to think of a dog's ability to focus as like a muscle, okay? And in the very beginning, the muscle is very weak. And so if you were to throw them in an environment where there's too much going on, your dog's going to fail, and they're not really going to understand how to recover. Recovery meaning, I'm distracted, now I need to get back focused. If the environment is too intense and too challenging, they'll never recover, they'll just get lost in the distractions. So we want to make sure we're in an environment where it's challenging, but they can still come back to you. So what that looks like is you could start in your home, okay? And you could show your dog food, but you want them to discover that you have food, okay? It's important that they discover that you have food, right? That's what makes the food even more interesting. In the beginning, they also need to be discovering behaviors. Instead of telling your dog what to do, they need to discover what you're wanting them to do to get their reward. You want to make this exercise very easy for them to figure it out, but at the same time, you still don't want to tell them right away. When the dog is discovering a behavior, they start to create dopamine because it's interesting to discover. Okay, so you want to start off with an exercise where your dog feels like they're chasing whatever reward that you have. And so the behavior that we like to start off with is heel. And so essentially your dog's going to feel like they're chasing you, but essentially they're learning how to follow you. Okay. If you have a piece of food, you are going to move a direction. And if your dog keeps up with you, you can deliver the food. If your dog starts to lose focus on the food, we want to move the opposite direction. This starts to teach your dog that when I lose focus, I will lose my reward and my reward gets further away from me. This is the first narrative that we want to establish because the dog must understand that there is a consequence whenever you lose focus. A mistake that most people make is when the dog loses focus, they try to put the food in front of the dog's face, right? Mm-hmm. At that point, the dog says, okay, there's no consequence. You're going to help me. So therefore, I can still be distracted and still get my reward. And whenever the dog's lazy-minded like that, it's hard to get them to focus when you're around more distractions. So again, setting the narrative that loss of focus equals loss of reward by moving the opposite direction. Then from there, you can play this game in a more challenging environment. But you don't want it too challenging because, again, we're trying to strengthen the muscle. And so we want to meet the dog where they're at and then gradually start to increase the challenge of the environment.
Okay. So, start inside, then move maybe out in the backyard, and then eventually front yard.
Yeah.
And then park.
Yep. Home Depot. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So my dog is pretty young, still a puppy. And is there a certain age where you can start applying these principles? I also have a senior dog as well. So is there a certain point where you would decide to start training them?
You can start teaching your dog how to focus as early as 7-8 weeks of age. And you can start teaching the focus even as they get older. Now, your expectations are going to be different, and as well as where you can start this is going to be different from each age. So in the very beginning, let's say they're 7-8 weeks of age, maybe you start to teach little fun focus drills just in your home. Okay. And then as your puppy gets older, then you can start to make it more challenging. If you have an older dog, you're analyzing kind of the exact same way. You're seeing how strong the dog's focus is, and you're kind of starting as if they were a puppy. So if their focus is weak, you would start where you would start a puppy, and then you would gradually increase the challenge.
Okay. So any age, basically. Just, above 7 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. At any age, and just always starting where the dog can be successful.
And then once my dog learns how to focus, how do I maintain this over time?
So it's important that you continue to challenge your dog. If you want your dog to be reliable in most environments, the more you challenge them, the more consistent they're going to be. And so constantly creating a little bit of adversity, even if it's somewhat unrealistic, right? It's still going to get your dog far away from the unwanted behavior, which is I'm distracted and I want to explore.
Okay. So how would you create adversity? Just give me an example.
So creating adversity would be maybe you're having your dog heel and they're giving you eye contact, and you're having a second handler or someone have random noises, dropping things, things that are kind of catastrophic, but at the same time, you're still accomplishing what you want.
That's a good example. So are there any common mistakes that I should avoid that might derail my efforts to teach my dog to focus?
I think one is make sure that whenever you're training your dog that they're hungry. So training sessions before meals is going to be important. Making sure your dog's not overfed. Making sure you're not putting your dog in an environment that's too challenging where they're constantly making mistakes. And the last thing is just being consistent with what gets the reward. That's an important part. So once your dog's confident about what behavior gets the reward, then you can start doing intermittent rewarding. What intermittent rewarding does is it starts to create dopamine. It's very similar to when someone is playing a slot machine. They don't know when they're going to get money, but there's strong hope that they're going to get the money. And so that's what we're doing with intermittent rewarding with the dog. So the dog has strong hope that this behavior gets it, but he doesn't know exactly when he's going to get it. That can help increase the focus as well.